Parshas VaYishlach it's the year 2205, and Yaakov is 97 years old. And the beginning of the portion describes how he sends messengers to greet Esav, and is informed that Esav is approaching, prepared to do battle. He's afraid, obviously. This has been 22 years since they saw each other, and since the departure from their home, when Yaakov had taken the blessings away from Esav, looking like an ethical act, but it was divinely ordained to have that happen. But obviously he's afraid, and even after 22 years, is Esav going to greet him peacefully, or is he not? And he's afraid, so therefore he prepares himself, and he applies the very famous three-pronged formula to prepare himself for this confrontation. Much is said about this, but he prepared himself in three ways: tefillah, through prayer, through diplomacy, and through war. The diplomacy was by sending gifts, by sending a tribute of gifts to him to show to him that he's friendly, he's coming on friendly terms. Praying to Hashem obviously goes with every type of strategy of success in anything we do, praying to Hashem for success, and also war as well. And that's expressed by him dividing the camp up into two parts, so that if Esav should attack him on one front, then Yaakov can escape from a different front and then still, engage in battle with him. And this is the classic formula for how we deal with conflict. And also the Balei Musa, the ethicists, apply this also to our personal battles as well within ourselves, that because Esav is also representative and symbolic of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination inside of us, so we all have an Esav inside of us. So therefore they say that the three ways that we should deal with our own Yetzer Hara is by davening to Hashem for success. Diplomacy means giving in. When I say giving in, giving a little bit to the Yetzer Hara of what it wants, meaning to say that if the Yetzer Hara has a proclivity or a desire for something, to cut it off cold turkey is not always so advisable. We have to use a little bit of strategy and a little bit of tact to be able to kind of give a little bit of the desire of the Yetzer Hara to it, but not completely, to give in completely, but also to wage war with the Yetzer Hara as well. I'm not going to go into this. This is a whole conversation unto itself, but that's the first part of the parasha. Prior to the actual confrontation, Yaakov bests Esav in a spiritual battle with Esav's angel, and earns the name Yisrael. So Yaakov's name gets changed to Yisrael, and then from that point onwards, forever, Yaakov and Yisrael are the two names for Yaakov, whereas we saw earlier, a few portions ago, Avram's name was changed permanently to Avraham. With Yaakov, it was changed to have an additional name of Yisrael. But this came about as a result of this battle with Esav's angel. And due to the wound he sustained in the battle, God prohibits Yaakov and his family from eating the Gid Anasha, the sciatic nerve, because the angel wounded Yaakov in the groin area and caused him to limp away from the scene. And then from that point onwards, the sciatic nerve, the Gid Anasha, became forbidden in the realm of kashrus. So that's why we don't eat meat from the hindquarters. That means technically it can be eaten as long as the butcher takes out the sciatic nerve. But because it's so difficult to do so generally speaking, it's most butchers don't sell meat from the hindquarters, which has the sciatic nerve in it, because it's too difficult to get it out. But there are expensive restaurants, kosher restaurants, where you can get it, and it's you can get kosher meat from which has the sciatic nerve taken out. But that whole law of sciatic nerve all emanates from this week's portion, when Yaakov had that battle with Esav's angel. And again, these are topics unto themselves. This is the purpose right now, is just the overview. Yaakov then and Esav meet after 34 years. Yaakov and Esav agree to separate peacefully. Esav returns to his kingdom of Seir, and Yaakov settles outside the city of Shechem. And then there's next famous episode of when Dinah is abducted, raped by Shechem, the son of Hamor. Shimon and Levi, they take revenge. They devise a strategy for successfully killing the entire male population of Shechem. And according to Chazal, the sages, that is, Shimon and Levi were 13 years old. Astounding. Goes on, Hashem then instructs Yaakov to move to a place called Beit El. Rivka's nurse, Devorah, dies, and Hashem confirms the name Yisrael upon Yaakov. And then Rachel eventually dies. Rachel, while giving birth to Binyamin, the last of the 12 tribes. And then Yaakov buries her in Beis Lechem. And that's why we know till today there's the Kever Rachel. People go there for years, for decades, for centuries, every single day of the year. It's a very holy place, Kever Rachel, the graveside of Rachel. She's not buried in the cave of Machpelah with the other patriarchs and matriarchs. And a story about that too. Following Rachel's death, Reuven switches the bed of Yaakov from Bilhah's tent to Leah's tent. Although Yitzchak will live another 21 years, the Torah relates his death at the age of 180 years old. And the remainder of VaYishlach lists Esav's descendants as well as the specific kings of Seir who ruled prior to King Saul, the first king of Israel. And that's the overview of the portion. So that's the overview of the portion. So let's now go into a particular point. We'll dive into one particular passage, one particular section of the portion, and as every week I experience this. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's in between. This one was very, very hard for me. I have to tell you, it was very, very hard figuring out, the answer to this conundrum and this difficulty. And from a little passage, a series of verses, which really, are very just kind of uneventful. So what I'm going to do is go into the seventh Aliyah, chapter 36, and it begins chapter 36, verse 20, and basically it lists the lineage. It's the end of the portion. So after all of these parts of the story are over, now it's the end of the portion, and Yaakov and Esav have separated ways. They've gone on to their separate locations, and the very, very last part of the portion lists the lineage of Esau, descendants of Esau. That's the very, very last part of the portion. But right before the last part of the portion, we've got this tiny paragraph over here, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with anything. And it tells us about the descendants of Seir HaChori, Seir the Horite. And of course, everybody knows who Seir the Horite is, right? Don't worry, I didn't know either. Seir the Horite, and it tells us about Seir the Horite. Who's Seir the Horite? Seir the Horite is somebody who lives in Seir, that later becomes the land of Esav. Which, by the way, as a side point, it's interesting, Esav had three names. He was called Esav, he was also called Seir, and he was also called Edom. Three names, so Esav, Seir, and Edom. Esav is the popular name, Esau. Seir is actually from the word Sa'ar, which means hair, because he was hairy when he was born. And then Edom is the name, comes from the word dam, or Edom, blood, red, because he came out very red. And the word Edom means red. It also is connected to what has in the root of the word dam, blood, because blood is red. And also the word Edom is related to the word Adamah, which means earth, so connoting the earthliness and the more physical nature of Esav. And he was hairy too, Seir. So therefore he has two additional names, Seir and Edom. And the country or the land that he eventually inhabited and he was given as an inheritance is the land of Seir. So there was also an individual by the name of Seir the Horite. And I forget now, I think the Ramban says that was he was called this because of the land of Seir that he was living in, which got that name because Esav was going to live there. But he has anything to do with Esav himself. So he's called the children of Seir the Horite. So even though the same name, like the name of Esav is called Seir, not the same individual and not even related necessarily. And again, the Torah goes through the lineage of this Seir Horite and gives us all these people. It says Lotan. It was Lotan and Shoval and Zivon and Aner and Dishon and Ener and Dishon. These are the names of the chiefs of the Horite. The sons of Lotan were Hori and Herman. Lotan's sister was Timnah. These are the sons of Shoval, Alvan and Alvan and I'll read it in Hebrew. It's easier. These are the sons of Lotan. These are the sons of Shoval, Alvon, Monochas, Avol, Shapho, Va'onon. All these names. Ve'ela b'nei Tzivon, and these are the names of the children of Tzivon. Now listen carefully. Aya, Ano, And who honor, and this is the same honor who found Yemim in the desert when he was when he was when he was taking care, when he was pasturing the donkeys of Tzivon, his father. That's interesting. Then it goes back to continue giving us the lineage of all these different names. And aside from what this passage is doing here, but the real thing which jumps out so strongly is what I just read to you right now, that in the children of Tzivon, it says that it was Aya and Anna. And by the way, if you're wondering who Anna was that guy who was out in the field and he was tending to the Yemim, to this thing called Yemim. He was tending to the Yemim of his father in the desert, and he was tending to them, and that's who it was. What is this? What is Yemim, and why do we have to know who this Anna was? So the answer to this is this. What kind of got me curious? So the answer to this is this. One answer is this thing called the Yemim that he was taking care of. He was actually taking care of mules. The word Yemim is mules. He was taking care of the mules of his father. No, I'm scratch that. Not the mules. I'm saying donkeys. He was taking care of the donkeys of his father Tzivon. And that's who he was taking care of. And that's who Honor is. So now you know who Honor is. He was the guy who was taking care of the donkeys of his father Tzivon. Now, what in the world does that do? It's like, what's going on over here? Like, and why do we have to know that? And what does it have to do with the whole portion in general about Yaakov and Esav? So this got me curious, and I started digging into it and trying to figure out who is this guy Honor, and why is he taking care of his father's donkeys in the desert? So the answer, so you dig into it, you start finding out where this comes from. So the source of it is from a Gemara in Tractate Pesachim. Tractate Pesachim. So the Gemara there tells us that in case you're wondering, who was the very first person in the world to ever crossbreed a donkey with a horse to produce a mule? So I'm sure you've all wondered that. I mean, I was, that's always been bothering me for years. Who was the very first person to crossbreed horses and donkeys to make mules? So when I saw this Gemara, I was so excited because I finally figured it out. I finally found out it was Honor. It was this guy Honor. Oh, Baruch Hashem. Now we know he was the guy he was the first guy who started the art of crossbreeding horses and donkeys to make mules. And this is what Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel tells us. It was him. He was the one who first did it. So, but obviously we need to understand a little bit more than that. The Gemara continues and says, and the rabbis themselves said the reason why he did this and the reason why he did discover this and he figured this out, it's not by accident, but rather it says that Anna was pasul haya. Anna himself as an individual was an invalid individual. He was an invalid human being. What does that mean? He was invalid because his father. The verse says over here that his father was Tzivon. But if you look in the verses elsewhere, it says that Tzivon was also his brother. So how can one person be your brother and your father at the same time? Well, the only way that can happen if it's the same person is if this guy Tzivon basically had an affair with his own mother, and he had an affair with his own mother to produce this person by the name of Anna, and hence Anna is both Tzivon's son, but also his brother as well, because his mother is Tzivon's mother as well. And this is who it is. So this is the Gemara says. This guy Anna was a mamzer, which is in English a bastard. So he was a mamzer, and he was the product of this forbidden union between his father and his grandmother, right? His father and his grandmother, and that's who Anna was. So because of this, it wasn't by accident. It wasn't by accident that he ended up engaging in crossbreeding of animals, right? And it says, the Gemara says that the expression "evil begets evil," or in Hebrew the expression is "mitzvah gereris mitzvah." One mitzvah begets another mitzvah, or one avera, one transgression brings about another transgression. There is such a phenomenon. There's in the world, there's when we do things either positive or negative, positive actions stimulate and magnetize more positive actions, and negative actions sometimes stimulate negative actions. Now, even though it's true that Anna wasn't guilty of this himself, it wasn't his fault that he was born as a mamzer, but nonetheless, there was some kind of spirit, there was some type of ruach about him that drew him to this kind of engagement in crossbreeding of animals, horses and donkeys, to make mules. So that's what it says. So that's for this reason. That's what it means. So it still doesn't answer why we need to know this over here. It still doesn't answer why the Torah has to highlight this. Obviously, there's a reason. There's some kind of message over here that the Torah is highlighting this and telling us this guy Honor, by the way, he's the Honor who was the one who did crossbreeding. And true, okay, fine. So he was a mamzer. He was a result of an inappropriate union, and that's why this happened. That's why he came about to do this. But okay, what's the message? What is the message behind it? So that's still the question. It's still the question. What's the message? And what's it doing in the portion over here? So when you look further, though, when you look a bit further into this passage in the Gemara where this comes from, nothing is without machlokas. There's always a dispute about everything. So it's true that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he's the sage who told us that this guy Anna was the guy who did crossbreeding, right? He was the first one. However, there's another sage here in the Gemara as well that says no, he wasn't the first one. He wasn't the first one to practice the art of crossbreeding, of making of breeding horses with donkeys to make mules. You know who the first person was? Can anyone guess who was the very, very first person to practice the art of crossbreeding and crossbreeding to make mules? Now, you're all on mute, so you can't even answer anyway. But if I tell you now who the very first person was, you'll be shocked. The very first person, the Gemara says, whoever did it was Adam Harisha, the very first man. He was the Adam Harisha was the very first person to crossbreed, and this is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. And listen to how it's presented. It's amazing. Rabbi Yossi says, and again, I'm just trying to organize this. We've already learned one opinion. It was Anna. Anna was the guy who did it. So we're going to put him on the shelf right now. We're now turning our attention to the other opinion in the Gemara, that it wasn't Anna who first crossbred, but it was Adam Harishon, the very first man. So we're now in the world in the opinion of this other opinion. So it says, Rabbi Yossi says that on Erev Shabbos, I lost the place. Sorry, I'm going to find it again. Here. Rabbi Yossi says, Shnei Devarim Ola b'machshava libaros be'erev Shabbos. There were two things that God was kind of planning and thinking about creating on Erev Shabbos of creation, but didn't create them then until Motzi Shabbos, until after Shabbos was over. And he decided to give these two things to Adam Harishon to make those two things instead. But Motzi Shabbos, on Motzi Shabbos, Nosan HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Deya, God gave knowledge and wisdom and understanding to man, to the first man, Me'ein Dugma Shel Mala, a knowledge and understanding similar to God's own knowledge and understanding. He granted that knowledge to Adam Harishon, and with that knowledge, Hevi Shnei Avonim, Adam Harishon took two stones, V'tachnan zu b'zu, and rubbed them together, V'yotza mehem ora, and made fire from those two stones. That's the first thing which he did with that knowledge. And then Hevi Shtei behemoths, and he took two animals, V'hirka zu b'zu, and crossbred them to each other. V'yotza mehem peret, and produced a mule. So with the divine wisdom of God, he makes fire and makes mules. That's what Adam Rishon did. Now, I don't know if I'm solving more problems or creating more problems over here, but it really is bizarre. So let's just appreciate that alone by itself, making fire. So making fire actually is very familiar to us because people are familiar with the Motzi Shabbos, the Havdalah ceremony after Shabbos is over. One of the things which we do is we light a fire. And that comes from what I just read over here. Because the origin of it is because Adam Harishon discovered or came up, was creative to be able to create fire by rubbing two stones together, and that's what we do. So that's where the tradition of lighting a candle with multiple wicks on it comes from Adam Harishon. So that we understand. And it also explains why the blessing of actually I'll leave that for now. So that's number one. But the mule, it's like, people are familiar with making a fire on Motzi Shabbos. Imagine if someone would run out into their barn to start making mules as well on Motzi Shabbos. That we've never heard of. But that's what he did. And what's really perplexing, what really makes it so confusing to us, is halachically, according to Jewish law, you're not allowed to do that. You can't make a mule. And, you can't, crossbreeding in general. A lot of laws of crossbreeding, milk and meat, mixing different species. But one of them is mixing different species of animals together to crossbreed, to produce a mule. That's not sanctioned in Jewish law. So why would Adam Rishon do that? Why would Hashem even consider doing it on Erev Shabbos to then go ahead and tell Adam, I'll save it for you to do? I don't want to do it myself. I'll let you do it. But it's wrong to do. How can that be? And then put that into the context of, even though we learned before, the other opinion says that the first person to make a mule was this honor. And the reason why he did it, because he was the result of a crossbreed of sorts himself. So it really puts a very negative spin on the whole idea of making a mule. And then to give that to Adam Rishon to make, it's very, very difficult to understand. So I'll share with you that I came to this last night. I was looking at this last night. I was like, what's going on over here? I have to figure it. So this morning I was preparing, and I'm like, I'm just hitting a brick wall. I can't find anything. I can't find any explanation for this. And I'm trying to think about what kind of ways to understand it. So eventually what I did, I decided, I don't know if people are familiar with Rabbi Abba Wagensberg. He's a good friend of mine. He used to live in Philadelphia. He used to work with Eitz many years ago. So he's the kind of, he's a person, he's very creative in his Divrei Torah, a lot of beautiful, deep ideas. And he lives in Israel. So I think I'm going to call him. I'm just going to call him. I said he's 7 hours ahead, so I'm just going to call him. And I called him up. It's like 6 o'clock this morning, and we're having a whole schmooze on the phone about this. We're discussing, and he doesn't understand either. He's come up with his ideas, and I'm coming up with my. I said, I don't know. It's just so strange over here. Why would Adam Rishon be allowed to make a mule, right? And if it's so forbidden in halacha, and it's the forbidden union, etc. So I couldn't figure out. He said, well, good luck. So I said, yeah, I've got 45 minutes to figure this out. So I came back to my computer, and thank God I have a lot of svarim over here. But there's one sefer which I don't have, which is called the Ben Yehoyada, very, very famous sefer, which is a commentary on the esoteric parts of the Talmud. I don't have it. Fortunately, we have the program called Sefaria over here, Sefaria, which I've shown you before. So Sefaria saves the day with everything. I looked on Sefaria, I looked at the verse, and I looked to see if the Ben Yehoyada has any commentary on this Gemara. Nothing there. So I was really had nothing to say. So I was going to cancel the class. No. So then I just, for some reason, I just did a search on Ben Yehoyada on this particular guy, and all of a sudden it comes up on Sefaria. For some reason, there's some glitch with the Sefaria that if you look at the Gemara itself, what I just read, it doesn't link you to this commentary. But if you search for the commentary by itself, you find it. So thank God I found this. I'm going to read it to you, what he says. The Ben Yehoyada explains this, and he says the following. On Motzi Shabbos, again, God gave man the wisdom to be able to a wisdom akin to the wisdom of the Almighty himself. And with this wisdom, he brought these two stones, ground them together, rubbed them together to produce fire. So it says the Ben Yehoyada, the Ben Yehoyada, by the way, was the Ben Ish Chai. It was a very, very famous, when did he live? 17th century, 18th century Sephardic Kabbalist. Very famous. So he says the following, nearly, it appears to me, Hatam Shanosim Bobina, that the reason why man is given understanding, Asos Dovazem Atzmo, Shiyavia, Lahodos Lo, Shabiyasul Olam Hazeh, Hilatzarach Habira Shal Orus Hanetzotzia Kedusha. Basically, he's saying is this: what do we have wisdom for? What is our wisdom for? Our wisdom in life, our wisdom that God grants us, is to produce sparks of holiness, sparks of light. That's what our wisdom is for. In other words, our wisdom is granted to us to be creative, to create new realities. Create new realities of Kedusha, sanctity. That's what our minds are for. Our minds are not here just to kind of get entertainment. Our minds are given to us, our being is given to us in order to draw out from the world holiness. V'herel lo zeh ba'avonim. And he showed him this. God showed him this way, a way of doing it with the stones. Shu chelek hadomein, which is the part of the world, which is the most inanimate part of the world. Even from those inanimate objects, you can produce power and light from those inanimate objects. And that's the purpose of him, giving him the stones, so to speak, and giving him the opportunity. Use your bina to create light from those stones. Partner with me in creation. As it says, Mikimi mi afadol, also about stones, because stone is representative of the most inanimate parts of life. And then similarly, it says in Tehillim and Psalms, Mikimi mi afadol, that Hashem lifts up even the most impoverished, lowly person from the dust heaps. So there's always potential. There's always potential, even in the darkest moments. I saw a fantastic thing, just as a side popped into my head. I saw this amazing slogan or like thing that someone shared with me. But I'll read it to you. It says, when Hashem pushes you to the edge of difficulty, trust him fully, because two things can happen. Either he'll catch you when you fall, or he'll teach you how to fly. Isn't that beautiful? Catch you when you fall, or teach you how to fly. Because that's the idea. Mikimi mi'afadol lifts us up from the darkest places. That's number one. That's the symbolism of making fire out of stones that Adam Rishon he used his bina for. But he also gave to him the understanding to be able to crossbreed animals and produce a parrot, to produce a mule, which is wrong, which is forbidden, which is not supposed to be. But precisely the point, to show him that yes, you could also use that creativity to produce something which is totally possible, which is totally impure and invalid, to allude to him, to allude to man, and to allude to us, that that if a person merits to it, yotzi ora ma'akava, if you have the merit and you use your creative mind wisely and properly, you'll merit to be able to produce kedusha, sanctity, and light. But kasher hotzi mina avanim, like Adam Rishon did from those stones. But if man is not meritorious and he misuses his power of creativity, he can produce that which is invalid, which is possible, which is impure, like a mule from a donkey and a horse. So it's precisely because of the wrongness of that activity of crossbreeding. That's what he was given. He was given a choice. He was given two opportunities and two examples of something which you can produce. You can produce light, or you can produce darkness. Now, I understand that it does say in the Gemara that he actually did produce the actual mule, but it was being done in this symbolic way. Obviously, this is the beginning of time. There's also discussion whether or not a person before the Torah was given, was this forbidden according to Jewish law? Obviously, there's no halachas yet, there's no law yet, but it's being given. This is how the Ben Yehoyada is understanding it. This is being given almost like a contrast. This contrast over here. Either use your bina, your creativity, to create goodness, or you use your bina, your understanding, your creativity, to create negativity and darkness. And therefore, it fits in perfectly with why he told him to do this, for this lesson, and then why the Gemara itself brings this second opinion. I presented it earlier that the other opinion is arguing with this one, arguing and saying that Anna was the very first person to make a mule. Perhaps it may not be an argument, but just an example that indeed Anna was the example of somebody who went ahead and misused the power of creativity, the power of production, of creating life, creating human life in an immoral, unethical way by producing the mule. And that happened because of another activity of creativity, which was done in a completely inappropriate and unethical way. And it sends home a very, very, very powerful message, tremendous powerful message of how we should use our creativity. How must we use our creativity? Creativity is powerful. I was looking up on the internet. There's articles and there are books and there are discussions about things called malevolent creativity. The paradox of creativity, malevolent creativity. I saw some examples like, we see this all the time in our lives. 3D printing can be used to create artificial limbs, but also to help people. But also can be used to produce handguns to avoid, metal detectors. Another Facebook is another. These things, great, powerful tools to do great things with, but also malevolent things can be used. It can be done with them as well. So it's a very, very large lesson of creativity, how to use our creativity either positively or negatively. And therefore, if you look at Havdalah, the Havdalah ceremony, so in addition to lighting the candle, reminiscent of the creative power of Adam and the creative power that we have to be able to create light in our lives, what's another thing we do with Havdalah? After you light it, actually it just remains lit. But then when you make the bracha, actually what you do is you actually put your fingers like this. You hold your fingers like this, a special way of doing it. Some people just do this. They kind of do this. I looked into this a few months ago. The proper way of doing it is you're supposed to take your thumb, cover your fingers like that with your fingers. And what you're supposed to do is actually to try to catch the contrast of shade and light between your fingers and over here by putting them towards the flame in order to cast a shadow so you can see the distinct line of light on your fingers in your hand itself, in order to be able to ascertain the discernment between light and darkness. And that's a major part of the Havdalah ceremony. In fact, Havdalah means separation. And I began to say earlier that the very first time we recite Havdalah, even before the ceremony, Motzi Shabbos, we actually do it in the Mariv service beforehand, and we insert an extra long paragraph into the blessing of Ata Chonein L'Adam Das, which means, God, you grant us wisdom. You grant us wisdom, and in that paragraph, we put in the mentioning of the fact that it's now Shabbos is over, and there's, we have to separate between the light and the darkness, between the holy and the profane. But that's inserted into the blessing about understanding, about chokhmah, about using our bina and understanding on our das to be able to discern. And the famous expression goes, if a person does not have daya, discernment, then you don't know how to separate. You don't know how to separate. I saw a very good quote. It says, if you don't know how to separate, you don't know what to join. That's the importance of separation. So our minds are powerful, of course. Our minds are for creativity, but they're also for discernment as well, to discern between what's right and what's wrong. And in ein das, ein Havdalah midnight das, person doesn't have das, the knowledge, then discernment and the ability to separate is not clear to a person either. It also says, the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, famous Medrash, says, someone who's careful with Havdalah, with the Havdalah ceremony of the separation, will not be harmed by the oppression of the nations. When the demarcation of Havdalah is breached, the results are negative for the Jewish people. But one who separates himself, keeps himself, protected, Hashem reciprocates by creating a barrier that protects him from the oppression of the nations of the world. So we have over here, we have this passage. Now we're getting, the picture is clearing up a little bit, it's becoming clearer. So at the end of the portion, we get this message, this all of a sudden pops out of nowhere, that in this lineage over here, there's a guy, Anna. And Anna, don't forget Anna. Don't forget Anna. Anna was the guy, he was the kind of the paradigm, or the paragon, or the negative paragon of someone who misused the power of creativity to make something which is impure, which is unethical, which is not right. He came from that as well. Don't forget him. Don't forget him. Don't forget that. And don't forget what Anna Rishon taught us as well, that you can use creativity in a positive way, but also in a negative way as well. Always keep that discernment at the forefront of your mind. Don't forget Anna. Okay, I got the message now, but why over here? Why in this portion? Well, the answer is simple. Because this is the portion of Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov and Esav, we spoke about this a little bit last week as well, also with Yaakov's departing episode with Lavan. Because Lavan also had a little bit of a similar scheme as well, but Yaakov is definitely the one who stands out as being the one who represents the ultimate historical threat to the Jewish people. And whenever we speak about Esav, he's always presented as this menacing, warring and evil personality. But the very, very famous prayer which Yaakov gives to Hashem at the beginning, when he's encountering him, he's going to meet him, and he says the famous words, Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad Esav. Save me, please, Hashem, save me from the hand of Esav, my brother. And the famous question, I think I talk about this every single year. The very famous question is, why does the Torah have to say? Why does he have to say from the hand of Esav and from the hand of my brother? I mean, we know he's his brother. We know it's Esav. It's redundant. So the famous commentary, and everyone speaks about this, is that there are two faces of Esav. There is the friendly side. There's the warring and killing side of Esav, but there's also the friendly side of Esav. And as the Jewish people, we are the Jewish people. This has always been the mantra and the warning that we have to always keep in front of ourselves, that in as much as there are physical threats, there are many, many spiritual threats as well. And the spiritual threats are so much more insidious and so much more threatening and can really destroy our identity. Spiritual threats come in the form not as an enemy, but comes in the form of a friend, as buddies and friends and socials and all of the different, just the world is an open place. It's a very, very open world. And again, going back to the creativity and the opportunities of creativity and opportunity and venturing out into the world and experiencing and tasting and just enjoying life. It's beautiful. Life is creative, and we are supposed to be creative, and we are supposed to partner Hashem in creating the world and creating light and creating all these things. But the message is always, in that world of creativity and in that world of harmony and in that world of connecting with others to engage in creativity, beware of the friendship sometimes too, because the friendship can be dangerous. And there can be interbreeding and intermingling and merging together with the forces around us, which are totally destructive. And that's what Yaakov, that's what the prayer of save me from the kiss of Yaakov, of Esav. In fact, in chapter 33, verse 4, where it says that when Esav came out, when they finally met each other, in 33, verse 4, when they finally met each other, the verse says that Yoretz Esav the crosser, the Esav ran to greet Yaakov, and he embraced him, and he fell and he went down, descended down upon his neck, and then it says VaYishlach, and he kissed him. So Esav gave him a kiss. So in the Sefer Torah, we know there's no vowels in the Sefer Torah, and the only things which are unusual in the text of the Sefer Torah in terms of vowels is that once in a while you get these dots above the word. And if you look in the Sefer Torah, there are dots, these dots which are placed above this word over here, no vowels. But there are dots above the word VaYishlach that he kissed him. So commentators talk about this, but one of the famous ones is that his kiss wasn't sincere, because underneath the kiss of friendship was the threat of death. And this is what Yaakov understood, and that's why Yaakov didn't want to travel with him. I mean, that's why the story goes on. We read at the beginning that when Esav invited, let's travel together, let's live life together. Yaakov understood the threat, and he said, I think it's better for the two of us to remain apart from each other. And he went off his way, and Esav went off his way, because Yaakov thankfully understood the message. We learned this last week also, why he put the stones around his head when he fell asleep when he had the dream about the angels going up and down the ladder. It was the same idea. He understood very, very well the danger of spiritual corrosion, which comes in friendship and connectivity. And this is the message. The message is, I think it's quite clear that the portion ends with one final reminder as we leave the story of Yaakov and Esav. The Torah throws in one final verse, one final reminder of beware of the enticement of connectivity and creativity, connectivity, and connected with others, because it could produce things which are impure, like the mule. And that's why honor serves that purpose. So therefore, we should always, in general, we should just always, exercise the power of our mind to be creative and to do things and to venture, to discover new horizons in our lives and to discover new opportunities. And that's like life. That's part of being like Hashem, of being creative and doing things. But always couple that with the picture of Adam Arishon being presented with that very same offer of being creative, but juxtaposed to that, but beware of the mule, beware of the potential of destructive and impure productivity as well. And always keep our minds, using our minds wisely to create, but to discern at the same time. So that's a little bit of a message over here from the portion.